passed at 3 Eastern today, and as notable as some of the deals were, the big news was the one that was not. Giannis Antetokounmpo is still with the Bucks, despite the team receiving aggressive offers and the 9-time All-Star being willing to move on. For more, we welcome in Shams Charania and Kendrick Perkins to talk about this. Shams, you have been on Giannis watch since this summer, but now he's still a Buck. What does the future look like for him?
Christine, loads of uncertainty for Giannis and the Bucks moving forward. The Bucks did listen. They engaged with teams on aggressive offers for Giannis at this NBA trade deadline. But that was really triggered because Giannis himself had communicated and made clear to high-level Bucks officials that he believed that it was time for both sides to part ways. So this came to a head right before the deadline, but the Bucks simply felt like they were not ready to move on with a deal. And talks never progressed to the point where they felt they were close on a deal. The Bucks told one team that they believed that they needed to be blown away by an offer to move Giannis. They told another team that they needed at least 5 to 6 first-round picks to move on a deal. So teams involved in this believe and get the sense that the Bucks truly feel that taking this into the summer, they can put together a roster able to contend for a championship around Giannis and get him back on board with the mission at hand in Milwaukee. And if he is on the roster and it's October 1, he is eligible for a 4-year, $275 million extension.
All right, let's bring in the guy. Like, the body language on K. Perk says a heck of a lot. So, K. Perk, all right, I'm glad you're joining us here in this conversation. So the saga's not done with Giannis. At least it is right now with the deadline, but with the summer there, and Shams talking about it, where would you like to see Giannis land finally?
Well, he's not going to be in the Bucks uniform, especially if they're talking about trying to build a championship roster around him, because what all-star caliber player or all NBA player or young star that's right there that's relevant that's trying to go to Milwaukee? Nobody. But look, Giannis is going to have many of options, as we can see. But I believe that Giannis wants to be in New York. And I believe that he kind of somewhat got in his feelings because New York wasn't aggressive and wasn't ready to make a move right now. And this is the reason why I feel like New York won at this trade deadline. For the simple fact that they could go out, because I believe they have the most complete roster, and go out and try to compete, possibly get to the promised land, win a championship. And if they don't, then they could make a move and go get Giannis because he wants to be in the Big Apple anyway.
Okay, so you're saying that you want Giannis in New York as well?
Look, I don't care where he go. I want to see Giannis on the contender, and it's not going to be in Milwaukee. All I'm saying is that, damn it, he wanted to go to New York in August. He asked them to move him, as Shams just reported. He went to him, and they started taking calls, and what happened was when the phone rung, it wasn't New York on the other side being aggressive right now.
All right, so he's still a Buck, as we know. Ja Morant is still a Grizzly. Shams, what's the latest with Ja?
The Grizzlies have been fielding interest and calls on Ja for really the last month, and they just did not find a team that was willing to offer in a serious way. There were multiple teams that had a level of intrigue with Ja Morant, the talent that he is at the age of 26 years old. He's still just 26 years old, guys, and so they fielded these interests, but teams like the Sacramento Kings, the Miami Heat, they had a level of interest, but they were not willing to make a serious offer. So now we'll see how the second half plays out. Ja Morant is still young enough, great enough when he is on the court that we'll see if he plays, how his value increases, and how it ends up working out for both sides come the offseason.
It's amazing. Yeah. Well, go ahead, K. Perk. Go ahead.
I'm saying we all agree that the Memphis Grizzlies are in a complete rebuild. They just got rid of Jaren Jackson Jr. The problem is that they couldn't get rid of Ja Morant. Like, Ja Morant is in a horrible situation right now for the simple fact of his value. Teams were actually calling the Memphis Grizzlies and telling them that they needed to attach a pick in order for them to take Ja Morant. That is disturbing to me. And so now all of a sudden you got to go back into that organization, and now all of a sudden they got to repair this relationship short term and try to convince Ja Morant that, hey, we still got love for you. We still want you to go out there and compete at a high level, and convince him to go on the floor so that he could help them help him. Meaning, go out there and produce to up his value so this offseason they could get what they want for Ja Morant.
Harden, he's a Cleveland Cavalier. Anthony Davis goes to my Washington Wizards. Jaren Jackson goes to Utah. We see Vucevic, Kristaps Porzingis have new destinations. Kuminga has a long-awaited new destination. He is an Atlanta Hawk. And you see down the list here, Dosunmu, that happened earlier today. He goes to Minnesota. Zubats to the Indiana Pacers. Well, we got to talk about these trades, and we got to talk. One of my guilty pleasures, Sam Quinn, is winners and losers at the NBA trade deadline. There's so much to talk about and so much to cover. So instead of covering every single trade we just saw on that chart, I'm going to ask you, Sam, what are your 3 favorite deals during the trade deadline? And then maybe we can talk about some deals you didn't like. Start us off.
Yeah, my favorite deal of the deadline for both sides was the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade for the Utah Jazz and the Memphis Grizzlies. I think trades work best when they have 2 teams that are going in opposite directions that have different needs. Memphis had been struggling for the last few years, kind of hovering around 500, dealing with the Ja Morant situation, the injuries. They wanted to head down. In the last 2 transaction cycles, they've traded Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson for 7 first-round picks. That's a great way to restart a rebuild, especially when you have one of the best drafting front offices in the NBA. The Grizzlies should make very, very good use of those draft picks. Utah has been at the bottom for the last 4 years. They've been tanking. They've been kind of tanking. They've been playing well early in seasons and then, sitting guys out later on, kind of starting their tanks late. But they've been in the lottery for 4 years. It was time for them to take a step forward. So they trade 3 picks from their own pick surplus from having given away Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert years ago. And they use that to get Jaren Jackson Jr., who's a perfect fit for what they need. Offensively, they were already in good shape with Lauri Markkanen, with Keontae George. Now they get a top defender in Jaren Jackson Jr. You pair him with Walker Kessler, who's going to come back next year, and you've got one of the best rim-protecting duos in the NBA. I assume they will find ways to keep Jaren Jackson off of the floor for the rest of this season because they owe the Oklahoma City Thunder a top 8 protected pick. So I imagine they're going to do what they can to keep that pick and then next year kind of go all steam ahead. But they've made themselves substantially better for the future. They've added somebody who's only 26 years old, can age up with their core. And next year, I think they're going to be ready for the playoffs. Utah and Memphis made my favorite trade of the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Utah. You don't think they're going to be a competitor necessarily, but you get Jaren Jackson alongside Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, Ace Bailey, the young talent. That team could make some noise within the next couple of years. Let's go to another one that you like. And we know the Minnesota Timberwolves were in the Giannis sweepstakes. And I don't know, maybe in the future they'll remain in the Giannis sweepstakes to the extent those exist. But they did pick up a pretty good piece here. Talk to me about this one.
Yeah, so last offseason, the Timberwolves had to make a decision. They had 3 key free agents. It was Julius Randle, it was Naz Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They were able to keep 2 of them while staying under the second apron, but they end up losing Nickeil Alexander-Walker because they have to stay under that figure, and you got to make some hard decisions, right? Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been a breakout player for Atlanta. Minnesota had no replacement. They had to get another guard at some point at this deadline. They wind up getting Ayo Dosunmu, who reminds me a lot of a younger Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and that they're both these athletic, defensive-minded guards whose jump shots came along a little bit later, made them easier to acquire later in their career. But now Ayo Dosunmu is making his shots. I think he'll be a great fit in Minnesota. But on top of that, the Timberwolves used Mike Conley as salary matching to get this done. It was a multi-step process. They traded Conley on Tuesday. But because Mike Conley got traded a second time from Chicago to Charlotte, he was waived, and now he can just re-sign with the Timberwolves. Minnesota can keep their beloved locker room leader. They get the Alexander Walker replacement that they needed, and now they can go into the playoffs and say, hey, maybe we have enough to win the West as is. If so, great. If not, we'll maybe revisit Giannis over the summer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, this next one that you like a lot of these were a surprise to me, if I'm being honest. But this one was a little bit of a surprise because I didn't think the Indiana Pacers were going to be making any sort of splash here. Talk to me about Zubats.
Ivica Zubats, I think Brad Botkin was on our airwaves a little while ago saying he's one of the best players in the NBA that the casual fan doesn't really know about. One of the best defensive centers in the NBA. Great rebounder, great passer, great screener. Nice little touch on his floater, good scorer around the basket. Can do pretty much everything except shoot threes. I think the Pacers upgraded on Miles Turner, who was their center as they made the NBA Finals a year ago. They did pay a pretty steep cost here. They give up Benedict Mathurin, who was a number 6 pick several years ago. They give up 2 first-round picks. One of those picks is one of the most interesting picks traded at the entire deadline cycle, maybe even in years. The way it works is that it will go to the Clippers only if it lands between number 5 and number 9. If it's 1 through 4 or 10 through 30, the Pacers keep it and they give a future pick to the Clippers. This is an incredible draft class. So obviously the Pacers weren't going to give up unfettered control of their pick. But lottery night is now going to be very, very dramatic because either the Pacers are going to get a top 4 pick and a future star, or the Clippers, a team that's given up all of their picks to get Paul George and James Harden over the years, had no way to access this kind of young talent, will get a pick between number 5 and number 9 in a great class. So I'm watching that drama. One of these teams is going to be very, very happy when the lottery ultimately plays out in May. But either way, I think this makes sense. The Clippers had moved away from this era of their team, trading James Harden for Darius Garland, trying to get younger. They trade Zubac at the peak of his value, get at least 2 first-round picks for him and Mathurin. So I think this trade works out for both sides. But the big winner, we won't know until lottery night in May.
I mean, we're not even at the playoffs yet, not even close, not even at the All-Star break. I actually can't wait for the lottery. It's partially because I'm a Wizards fan, and we'll get to that in a second. Before we get to the Wizards, though, Sam, what's the game plan for the Clippers? We know they had to offload James Harden. Zubac's now not on the team. They still got Kawhi. Like, what direction are they heading in?
So the Clippers now are set for around $45 million in cap space this offseason if they want to maximize it. And then they could create even more in the summer of 2027 when there are a lot of big-name free agents. I don't know if, say, Giannis Antetokounmpo or Nikola Jokic is going to want to sign there, but they'll have talent available to them. I think their logic here was, let's get Darius Garland, a 26-year-old all-star, build around him, use our cap space, use our flexibility. Los Angeles is a very powerful recruiting market. Players want to live there. They want to play there. That's how they got Kawhi. That's how they got Paul George. I think they're betting that at some point in the next couple of years, they'll be able to use these picks that they traded Zubac for, some of their own picks that are slowly starting to become more available. You know, eventually they did have to stop giving picks up for Paul George in that trade, so they still have their picks in 2030 and 32, pending that Kawhi Leonard aspiration investigation. We'll see how that pans out. I think they're betting in the next couple of years we'll be able to trade for another star, pair that guy with Garland, and we'll move forward that way.
This smells like a aging star to the Clippers in a couple of years, if not sooner, and we know how that typically works out for them. Let's flip the script a little bit and talk about trades that you didn't like very much. And I got to be honest, this one surprises me a bit, but there's a lot of bias here because I'm a Wizards fan. I kind of loved what they did. I love their young talent, the pieces they have. Tell me why you didn't like this Mavericks-Wizards trade, at least for the Wizards side, but you can talk about both teams.
Well, I'll get through Dallas quickly, right? I just think, given how well Cooper Flagg has played as a rookie, I would have liked to have seen him play with Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving next year. I think the Mavericks could have been pretty good. Maybe not win the championship, but could you win a round in the playoffs, maybe make a surprise run to the conference finals? I think that might have been on the table. It's a shame to punt it away, but they saved so much money that I think it was justifiable. They go from deep in the luxury tax to under the tax entirely, sets them up to have some flexibility to get younger pieces around Cooper Flagg moving forward. I can't fault them too much. My question with the Wizards is, wasn't trading Bradley Beal and starting this rebuild 3 years ago supposed to be getting away from being in the middle, getting away from these older, overpaid players? Anthony Davis is about to turn 33. He has $120 million left on his contract over the next 2 years. He's never on the court. He's always hurt. I think there were a lot better and more creative ways they could have used their leftover financial flexibility than trading for a player that, number one, I don't trust to be healthy, and number two, doesn't really fit the timeline of their young players, right? Like, you know, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Trey Johnson, like those types. Those are promising young guys, but they're going to need 2 or 3 years to kind of reach their peak, get ready to start winning in the playoffs. By then, Anthony Davis is going to be in his mid-30s. He's not going to be capable of winning at a high level anymore. He's not going to be a star at that point. I would have rather they taken their remaining cap space after the Trae Young trade, try to split that up among a couple of players, right? Could you have tried to steal Isaiah Hartenstein, who has a team option with the Thunder? Could you have tried to sign Walker Kessler from the Jazz to a big restricted free agency offer sheet? I think there were a lot of ways they could have used that money, spread it among multiple players, targeted younger guys, got players who not only could have helped them in the short term, but helped them in the longer term as those younger guys get closer to their prime. So that's how I would have spent the money. They obviously wanted to go for the bigger name. They did it in Anthony Davis. I think he'll be good for them when he's on the court. I just don't know how often that's going to be.
Yeah, that's a completely fair argument. All right, let's talk about another trade that she didn't like quite much, and it involves the Detroit Pistons, who, you look at the FanDuel odds in the Eastern Conference, they're kind of leading the pack, tied with at least one other team in terms of the odds. So they're trying to win now. They think they can win now, and they added a piece. Why don't you like it?
I have no problem with Kevin Huerter. I think he is going to help them. They needed more shooting, and they got it. I just look at the Brooklyn Nets with Michael Porter Jr., and I say, you guys were a match made in trade heaven. The Pistons badly needed a secondary scorer, three-point shooting, somebody who could take some of the burden off of Cade Cunningham and spread the floor for that great paint offense they have. Michael Porter Jr. would have been so perfect for them, and the Nets are tanking. They should want to move him. I figured there would have been a deal here. Maybe it would have involved one first-round pick, a first-round pick and a player, 2 first-round picks, whatever it was, that could have gotten Porter to Detroit, given Detroit exactly the secondary offensive punch that they needed, and, maybe save the Nets from themselves a little bit because they need to lose games. They don't control their first-round pick next year. Getting off of Porter and maximizing their draft pick this year would have been a priority for me. Instead, they have a very good player still on their team. The bottom of the standings now are really bunched up. You could have the worst record one day and the 5th worst record the next. If you really prioritize how many lottery balls you're going to have in May, I think getting Porter off of the team would have helped. They didn't do it, and I'm more lamenting a trade that didn't happen than disparaging a trade that did. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense as well, Sam. Can I ask you one quick follow-up? Because there's a lot of people out there that I think are just default Steph Curry fans, but Steph Curry fans for sure. And I know for me, I'm not a Golden State fan, but I kind of want to see him succeed down the late stretch of his career. Obviously, they made a trade, getting 30-year-old, often injured. We're talking about Anthony Davis, Kristaps Porzingis, Buddy Hield, and Kuminga leave to go to the Hawks. What's your reaction to that trade? And I asked you about the plan for the Clippers. What do you think the plan is for Steph Curry and the Warriors? I think the moment Jimmy Butler tore his ACL, any hope they had of going on a serious playoff run without making a trade for somebody like Giannis Antetokounmpo was gone. I don't think it made sense to trade 2, 3, 4 first-round picks for a Trey Murphy, for a second-tier star, a younger guy. I think they should have prioritized making sure that, we are trying to win with Steph, but we can't mortgage the future after he's gone unless we're getting somebody like Giannis who's so good that he could keep us afloat after Steph retires. Whether that's in a year, it happens. I think they had to be responsible with their trade assets. And what they did with Porzingis is they took a low-risk, high-reward swing. Jonathan Kuminga was not going to be on the team moving forward. Clearly, that situation had played out, and it hadn't worked for anybody involved. One way or another, he was going to get traded. Porzingis, in the past, has been exactly the sort of player that Golden State has long wanted next to Draymond Green. They've badly wanted a center who could shoot threes. They've badly wanted kind of a stationary rim protector, somebody really big to park in front of the basket. And they've needed somebody who could kind of be a switch buster, right? Somebody who, if you're going to switch screens against Stephen Curry, try to take away his three, you can just pass the ball into Kristaps Porzingis against a mismatch, and he'll get you an easy bucket. The fit made a lot of sense in theory. The big question here is Kristaps Porzingis' health. He's been dealing with that POTS syndrome since last year that's really affected him, right? When he's been on the floor, at times he's been okay. Other times he's looked lethargic. There's been talk about him having a rapid heartbeat, about having all sorts of really serious medical complications because of that POTS syndrome, and we don't know what version of him they're getting. If they had given up a first-round pick or real draft capital to get him, I might be concerned. But they only gave up a player in Kuminga that they didn't want anyway. So sure, take the risk, see how it goes, and then in the offseason you can reevaluate. Maybe you want to re-sign him. Maybe you want to pivot into something else. Maybe there's another guy, whether it's Giannis or somebody else, that is worth giving up 3, 4 first-round picks to get. But I don't like this idea that just because Stephen Curry has earned it, you should mortgage your entire future just to give him a slightly better chance at maybe winning a round of the playoffs. No. If you're trading 3 or 4 first-round picks, it has to be for somebody that meaningfully puts you in the championship conversation. That player did not exist at this deadline, aside from Giannis, who they ultimately couldn't get anyway.
Sam Quinn, great stuff as usual. One of the busiest people, I don't know, maybe in the world over the last week. Take some time and relax. Let's take a look at the shortest odds to win the NBA Finals available on FanDuel Sportsbook. We have the Thunder, no surprise there, plus 110. Pretty big drop off to the Nuggets, plus 700. And then we see the Knicks and the Pistons, a couple of Eastern Conference foes. And then the Cavaliers with James Harden